You're sitting at your kitchen table on a Tuesday night, staring at a piece of paper that says you won. You took the person who owed you money to small claims court, you proved your case, and the judge agreed with you. But your bank account is still sitting at zero, and the person you sued is ignoring your texts. Winning the case was only half the battle, and today we're going to simulate exactly what happens next, step by step, to get your cash. This is education about how the system generally works, not legal advice for your specific situation, because the exact rules and deadlines change depending on where you live. Let's start the clock. We'll pretend your name is Alex and you sued a local contractor named Bob. Bob took a $3,000 deposit to fix your roof, never showed up, and left you with a tarp flapping in the wind. You went to small claims court, which is a special court designed for regular people to resolve disputes quickly without needing an expensive attorney. The judge looked at your canceled check and the text messages where Bob kept making excuses. The judge signed an order saying Bob owes you $3,000 plus court fees. That piece of paper you're holding is called a judgment. A judgment is simply the judge's official decision that legally confirms someone owes you money. A lot of people think that when the judge hits the gavel, the court clerk just walks a stack of cash over to you. That almost never happens. The court doesn't collect the money for you. They just give you the legal right to hunt the money down yourself. Here's exactly what happens, hour by hour, starting the morning after you win. You wake up, you make your coffee, and you wait. You usually have to wait a specific number of days, often around 30, to give Bob a chance to pay voluntarily. This waiting period is required by law in most places. During these 30 days, you should be gathering every piece of information you can find about Bob's financial life. You need to know where he keeps his money. After the 30 days pass, Bob still hasn't paid you a dime. Now the real work begins. You need to go back to the court system, but you aren't filing a new lawsuit. You're asking the court to help you enforce the judgment. Enforcing a judgment means using the power of the legal system to actively take the money from the loser's accounts or property. To do this, you first have to find out exactly where Bob does his banking. You can't just send a legal document to a random bank and hope for the best. You need solid proof. You might have an old text message where Bob mentioned his bank's name. You might have a copy of a check he wrote you. If you don't have any clues, you might have to ask the court to order Bob to come back to the courthouse for something called a debtor's examination. A debtor's examination is a follow-up hearing where the person who owes you money is forced to sit across a table from you and answer questions under oath about their bank accounts, their job, and their property. You file the paperwork to demand this examination. Now we jump forward a few weeks. You're sitting in a small, windowless room at the courthouse. Bob is sitting across from you, looking nervous. You ask him where he does his banking. He has to answer truthfully, or he could go to jail for lying to a judge. He tells you he has a checking account at a local credit union. He also tells you where he works. Now you've the exact target you need. You leave the courthouse and immediately fill out your next set of forms. The first tool you grab is called a bank levy. A levy is a legal seizure of property to satisfy a debt. You fill out a form asking the court to issue a writ. A writ is a formal command from a judge ordering a specific person or company to do something. In this case, it's a writ of execution, which commands the local sheriff to go grab Bob's money. You take this writ to the county sheriff's civil division. The sheriff takes this writ to the payroll department at Bob's construction company. The payroll manager receives it and is legally bound to obey it. The next time Bob gets paid, the company skims a chunk right off the top of his paycheck before he ever sees it. They mail that chunk to the sheriff, who mails it to you. They'll keep doing this every single pay period until your entire judgment is completely paid off. The law usually limits how much they can take from each check because the system doesn't want to completely starve the person who owes you money. There are federal rules and state rules that protect a certain amount of Bob's income, but the rest is fair game. If Bob quits his job to avoid the garnishment, you might have to wait until he gets a new one. That's the frustrating reality of this process. You're constantly chasing the money. Let's pretend Bob doesn't have a regular job and his bank account is completely empty because he only deals in cash. You still have options. You can place a lien on his property. A lien is a legal claim against someone's real estate that acts like an invisible rope tying up the property. If Bob owns a house, you file your judgment with the county recorder's office. This attaches a lien to his house. It doesn't force him to sell the house today, but it completely destroys his ability to sell it or refinance it later. If Bob tries to sell the house 5 years down the line, the title company will find your lien. They'll refuse to hand Bob his money until your debt is paid in full, plus any interest that is built up over the years. You might even be able to force the sale of his property through a process called foreclosure, which is when a court orders a piece of property to be sold to pay off a debt. But forcing a sale of someone's house is complicated, expensive, and very rare for a smaller small claims judgment. It's much more common to just let the lien sit there and wait. There's another tool you can use if Bob owns a business with a physical storefront. You can send the sheriff to do what's called a till tap. The sheriff literally walks into Bob's store, stands at the cash register, and tells the clerk to open the drawer. The sheriff takes the cash inside to pay your judgment. If the drawer doesn't have enough, the sheriff might start taking inventory, like seizing equipment or tools to be sold at a public auction. Every single one of these tools requires specific forms, specific fees, and absolute precision. If you check the wrong box on the writ, the sheriff might reject it and you lose another 3 weeks. If you send the wage garnishment to the wrong department at the company, it gets ignored. This is exactly why many people who win in small claims eventually hand the paperwork over to a professional. You can hire a collection attorney to handle the sheriff and the bank levies for you. You can also sell your judgment to a debt buyer. A debt buyer is a company or person who pays you a smaller guaranteed amount right now, maybe 50 cents on the dollar, in exchange for taking over your judgment completely. They do all the hard work of chasing Bob, and you get a smaller chunk of money without the headache. The most important thing to understand is that a judgment is a ticking clock. It doesn't last forever. Every state has a rule about how long a judgment stays valid. In some places, it's 10 years. In others, it's 20 years. If that time runs out, your legal right to chase Bob evaporates completely. However, in most places, you can file a simple piece of paper to renew the judgment before it expires, giving you another 10 or 20 years to keep hunting for the money. You've to be relentless. The legal system gave you a powerful set of weapons, but it won't fire them for you. You've to pull the trigger every single time. When one levy misses, you file another. When he changes jobs, you find out where he works next and serve the employer again. What is the absolute craziest excuse someone gave you when they owed you money? Drop that story down in the comments. If this breakdown handed you the exact tools you need to go get what you're owed, please share this video with a coworker who got ripped off on a side job. Make sure you subscribe to Scribble Law so you always know the actual rules of the game before someone tries to outrun your paperwork.